Great. Hi, we did our restoration project at Seven Islands State Park, and our focus was on riparian buffer restoration. I'm Lillian Brown,
And I'm Drake Northup.
and this is our project.
So our project's goal was to stabilize the stream bank along the French Broad River at Seven Islands State Park, as well as to remove all the invasive species from the area. Seven Islands State Park was initially modeled after an oak hickory savanna, and the land was originally used for as farmland with cattle grazing the area, which was then later used for sand dredging and then sold in 1990 and kept as a wildlife refuge. And then in 2014, it became the 56th state park in Tennessee.
So, when we initially picked our site, we performed an inventory to see what was on the land. So, we were happy in that we found a few different native species. So, the ones we found were a panicled tick trefoil, yellow crownbeard, frostweed, and eastern poison ivy. So those plants were pretty significant. There were a few different um, species splattered through our area, but the thing that was most notable from the natives we found was the presence of one Virginian tiger moth. This was the only insect we found doing our restoration, which was highly concerning. But since we were able to see one of these tiger moths, we decided to prioritize that in our project moving forward with what natives we planted in terms of food for that moth. So, how, although we were happy that we were able to find native species, we were shocked by the amount of non-natives on the site. The two biggest players were the Chinese privet and the Japanese honeysuckle. These were very much present, especially on the sloped area where the erosion was most prominent. So those were our highest priorities for removal. However, the other plants we found were the Japanese stilt grass, the multiflora rose, and the coral dock. These weren't as high of a concern just because they weren't as prevalent, but we did find it necessary to remove the multiflora rose just because of how close it was to the trail and its potential to harm guests or potentially impede their experience. And then here's a map of the site. We worked in the red zone, and as you can see, it's pretty close to a couple of different trails. And then just out of frame is the bridge at Seven Islands. And then you can see our site is right next to this small island. Now, both sides of the bank were undergoing severe erosion, but you could tell that there had been some work performed on the island as there were several large boulders, that small white thing at the bottom, placed to try to mitigate the impacts of the high pressure water flow. But as far as we could tell, nothing had been done on the bank that was inland. So that was our priority for our project and why we picked the location we did.
This is the timeline of the work we did. We initially started on September 24th by contacting State Park Ranger Stephanie Mueller. We asked her where we could do our work, what tools we had available to us, and where she wanted us to put the invasives that we did remove. And then September 25th, we went out and did our site assessment, actually taking a survey of the land, like what the environment was like, as well as taking inventory of all the native and non-native plants that were there. September 28th, I went out and did site measurements, got an aerial estimation of around 375 square feet. And then on September 29th, me and Lily built our statement of work. We began the actual invasive removal on October 15th, got around half of the invasives completely removed, and then finished that up November 12th, where to the point to where we were now able to plant seeds.
So, moving on to the removal and implementation stages, the primary part of our project was the manual invasive removal. So, because it was on state park property and so close to the waterway, we didn't feel quite comfortable using chemical removal, so we decided to 100% stick to manual removal. So in order to accomplish this, we used a few different tools and supplies. Most of these were thankfully provided by the park as we had access to a barn that contained these supplies. We used a wagon, gloves, trowels, lopers, work pants, and boots. Invasives were manually removed and relocated to a site designated by the ranger, and we used the wagon to do this and a wheelbarrow. So we were pretty lucky in that our project, we had lots of autonomy given to us in terms of the project. So we were able to make decisions about where exactly we wanted to have our site, what our goals were for the site, what species we wanted to prioritize, what we wanted to keep and remove, and to what extent we considered some species invasive. So an example of this was when we got to the bank, we saw the erosion was even more severe than we thought. And we, after consulting Dr. Franklin in the forestry department, we didn't think it was wise to completely remove all the invasives since that was at that point pretty much the only thing on the bank. So we decided to cut the stems of some of the remaining invasives after doing some complete removal. We decided to cut the stems and leave the roots just to hopefully stabilize the soil until we can get more natives established. And then the secondary part of our project was the implementation phase. However, uh, despite our plan to plant a native seed mix, it didn't arrive in time, so we weren't able to really accomplish this phase. But our goal with this part was to plant a native seed mix uh, that established two things. One, its roots would help prevent further erosion and stabilize the stream bank. And two, would provide a food source for species such as the moth that we focused on. And then here's our work tracker. All group members were given access via email to a Google Sheet where they were responsible for filling in their name, the work they did, the status of the work, the time allotted to that work, and the date completed. So between Drake and I, we are very proud to say we worked a total of 20.5 hours at this site. Drake spent 10.75 hours and I spent 9.75 hours. So we were very happy with the time we spent and we thought we were able to make a huge impact just between the two of us um, in terms of hours.
As for the future monitoring and management, a team of professionals will have to come in and handle the stream bank due to the severe erosion because it is simply too dangerous for us to work on by ourselves. The seed mix we planned on planting there was an oak hickory savanna seed mix to match the ecosystem of Seven Islands. And the site will then be kept under survey and maintenance by Seven Islands State Park and future volunteers, continuing to remove invasives and implementing native plants to our area.
So, in summary, we saw some pretty significant results with our project. We were able to remove almost all of the invasives from our site. The image on the right, I feel like is a pretty good comparison of before and after. This picture doesn't show our whole site, but what it does show is a pretty good snapshot of one of the most effective and disturbed areas. So on the bottom is when we first did our assessment, and you can see it's simply covered in invasives. You can see some yellow crownbeard poking out, but it's not prominent, and most of it is being strangled out by the Chinese privet. So what we did was we went in and we removed all of that, and you can still see on the top picture some of that yellow crownbeard that we were able to save, but almost all of the invasives are gone. And then in the next phase of the project, when the seed mix does arrive, those will be planted and hopefully we can see more results, which brings us to the monitoring stage, which will be a shared effort in collaboration with the Seven Islands Park staff, who will hopefully perform the more necessary uh, riparian buffer restoration, which was out of the scope of our project, which, due to the level of severity, will probably include using a mix of rocks, sand, and soil to fill in large holes on our site and placing large boulders in the water to help divert some of that water flow that was really causing the core issues. But in terms of what we accomplished, we were able to remove over 4 wheelbarrows of invasives and relocate them to the site designated by the ranger about a quarter of a mile away. So we are very happy with our results, and currently now we're in the monitoring stage. Thank you.